welcome to this special interview with Lord Roderick Balfour, the great-nephew of the former British Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour. Lord Roderick, thank you for your time and for this interview. I'd like to first start by asking you about your family legacy and the history of the name of the family of Balfour. Being a descendant of former Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour, how do you think that carrying the name shaped your own perception and understanding of the declaration and the impact given its significance and to the whole world, I would say?
Good. Well, listen, thanks for your interest. The Balfour Declaration, you may have read before, hung on the back of the lavatory door in our house in France. Nobody ever talked about it. It was just not a feature through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s when I was growing up. Although I say the 70s, by then it was a bit, because the first time I came across it seriously was during the Six-Day War in June 1967, when I worked for the New York Herald Tribune in Paris. And unlike today, you'd be amazed, all of the Champs-Élysées and all the area around was completely pro-Israeli, bizarrely. That wouldn't be the same today at all. And then I really, when it first sort of mattered and people wanted to talk about it, I would say was really around the centenary, so really quite recently.
And I wanted to ask, looking back 100 years ago, do you think that the UK government and your great-uncle have foreseen the long-term consequences of this declaration?
Do you think that President Trump and everybody else can see the long-term consequences of what they're proposing today in 100 years' time? I mean, nobody can. And I think it's very important to stress, I mean, a lot of people who talk about this talk as though it was a problem 100 years ago. It wasn't. I mean, there were only 700,000 people in the whole of Greater Palestine and Cisjordania and I think the south of Syria. 700,000. There are now, 12, 13 million people inhabiting a smaller area. We hadn't had the Holocaust, which made a huge difference. And no, I mean, Arthur Balfour and the rest of the cabinet. And I mean, I think it's important to stress that this document was not typed out by his secretary dictating to him over breakfast. I mean, this was, he was the foreign secretary, and somebody else might have been the foreign secretary. In fact, somebody else did say somebody else should be writing it, I think. But anyway, it ended up with his name on it as the foreign secretary.
And before moving to, I will ask you a bit more about the declaration itself, but before moving to that part of the conversation, I have a question about how you talk about the Balfour Declaration in your own family. Is it usually a source of pride, or is it usually a source of controversy?
I think in its original form, and for the reasons it was written, I think that there is pride. But I mean, I think we very much see Arthur as having done it as the foreign secretary. Admittedly, he was, particularly through my great aunt, a great friend of Chaim Weizmann and Theodor Herzl and people. And he was, he was a great philosopher and he was a great humanitarian. And so obviously he was very influential within the cabinet and as the foreign secretary, because you had, what goes around comes around. You had the Tsar expelling all the Jews from Russia who ended up here and in America, not being able to speak English with their strange habits and everything else. And that preyed on people to say, and they wanted to, go to the land of their forefathers, to the land of Moses. And that meant Palestine. So it was very much a humanitarian gesture, but I mean, it's not as definite in here as a lot of people would like to think it is.
And moving on to the declaration itself, and I think this is a question on everyone's mind in the Middle East, as you may know. Why do you think that it was a promise to one group of people, a homeland for one group of people, but did not promise the same for another group of people who were inhabitants of the land at the time?
Well, because the Palestinians, if you like, for want of a better word, were not under persecution. Nobody was chasing them. Everybody was, I don't wish to demean them, but I mean, I think when I read about the history, it was basically an agrarian economy with sheep and goat herds, no sophistication, very few people, as I say, and therefore I think they thought if a few Jews wanted to go and live there peaceably, all the Abrahamic faiths, Muslim, Christian and Jew, why would there be a problem? So, there was no sort of contentious arguments over the breakfast table about how can you do this? Everybody was coexisting peaceably. But a lot of it obviously has to do with the Holocaust, population explosion, that there isn't room for everybody.
Do you think that the declaration, now looking at it, fulfilled some of its goals?
When you say its goal, I mean, I have it in my hand because I always want to get it absolutely right. I have much further we have a declaration of sympathy, that's all, with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. So there's no, we will support the creation of a state of Israel, as is, under pressure to create for Palestine at the moment. And this is the strong bit. Everything else is what I think in the lawyers call precatory. It's a wish, okay? But the next sentence is the one that gets me into trouble in Israel. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. So I leave anybody listening to think what is going on today is not what he or the government of the day would have wished.
But do you think that the UK government has done enough for that clause to protect non-Jewish communities?
That's a very good question. I mean, when you say done enough, I mean, I felt for many years that the United Nations, who got involved in the Congo, in Sudan, in all these other places, never really got sufficiently involved in the Holy Land. And I call it the Holy Land for all three religions. And I've never quite understood why not. And particularly as, one has to say it, but Israel has never attacked anybody else. I mean, they've gone off and done these missions in recent times, but they've never wanted to wipe out the Palestinians. I mean, the occupation of the West Bank and these settlements under the very right-wing Israeli factions, is not something. I mean, that goes completely contrary to this, as well as to United Nations resolutions and things like that. So, what could we do, just Britain? I mean, it wasn't a, we came out of it after the mandate finished in 1947-48 and the State of Israel was announced, recognized by the US, recognized by the United Nations. They were a sovereign nation by whatever other means you want to call them. So, it wasn't up to us to say, you are contravening the declaration. I would have liked it if they had, and the United Nations had said, we're going to come in here and sort things out, because it's contrary to the declaration.
I'd like to move to the UK's historical decision to recognize Palestine last week. And this was an important day for a lot of Palestinians and Arabs in the whole world. Mm-hmm. What do you think of this recognition? And do you think that it was a step taken too late? No, I don't at all. I think that again, with the United Nations help and everybody else, there should have been a far greater effort to deal with the two population problem much, much earlier, whereby there would have been far more democratic
regimes in both Gaza and the West Bank. And instead they've just been able to run riot and do whatever. I mean, the West Bank hasn't had elections for 20 years. Gaza has been ruled by Hamas. I mean, are these, in their present condition, are these really suitable entities for us to recognize as a state? I'm not sure. But I mean, it's symbolic. It shows that we are in favor of the two-state solution, but there's got to be a lot more before it actually means anything.
And do you still believe in a two-state solution? Do you think that with today's circumstances that it's still a viable solution?
Well, clearly the Israelis don't think so. And I don't think Hamas thinks so, because Hamas want to get rid of Israel, and Israel doesn't trust any of the Arab countries while they're run as, the Palestinian enclaves, until they have a reassurance that they're not going to be populated by people who swear death to Israel from the river to the sea. So you've got these two blocks who are implacably opposed to each other. And I suppose that's what, love him or hate him, but, President Trump is actually somebody who at last is not just muttering warm words, but actually getting on and doing something. And I think has realized, and obviously done a lot of talking around the Middle East and with other Islamic countries, who, you will know yourself because you're from there. I understand none of the countries want to have an unstable world there, which is rife with terrorism and murder and everything else. I mean, I think, excuse me, especially Saudi, I believe, very, very keen to have peace. And of course, we were talking earlier about Abu Dhabi, and I mean, these are now commerce has taken over from the theocracy element, which I think ruled a lot of the sort of views of Islamic countries before. And now they're major economic powers. They don't want to see war and terrorism on their doorstep. So I think that's why they're, as I understand it, giving their full support to this effort, the Trump effort.
But moving to today's reality, do you have any reservations about Israel's act of violence? Do you think, what is your view on what Israel is committing against the Palestinians today?
I think you've got to take that in two halves. I think the West Bank is something that really has got to be stamped on. That is so contrary to the declaration and against the United Resolutions things which we were talking about. But Gaza, how has Hamas allowed this to happen and not said, listen, please don't bomb all our houses and think we will surrender the hostages? I mean, one feels, and this is evidently what everybody else feels through the Trump proposal, that Hamas, I mean, he said it, Hamas has got to be neutralized because they're the destabilizing force. But I think the West Bank and Gaza are, but I'm no lawyer, I'm not a professional historian, so these are just my personal opinions, but you've got to separate the West Bank problem from the Gaza problem.
And how's your relationship with the Palestinians and the Israelis, if you have any?
Well, I've not really come across too many Palestinians per se who live in Palestine, but I have come across a lot of the Arabs who live and work in Israel. And of course they don't like it either, because they've peacefully coexisted in Israel, done a lot of business with, they're integral part of the business landscape.
And I just want to ask two more questions. One of them is, when you reflect back at the declaration, for you personally, do you feel that it's a source of responsibility? Do you feel it's a burden that you carry the Balfour name and you do these interviews? And
that's interesting. I mean, I suppose that really why I accept sort of the invitation to do these interviews is it gives me an opportunity to defend the declaration and point out what it actually says. I've read up quite a lot of opinions on the declaration, and one of the things I find, which I think are provocative to the Palestinian side, is all sorts of people have read this and said, oh, this is definitely an official document. This is, we will create the Israeli state. And it doesn't say that, but it's been seized on by sort of the more, I suppose you'd call them extreme or right-wing in this day and age, elements who want to say that this has a force of law. As I say, I'm no lawyer, but when I read it as it says, and I'm not trying to interpret it like a scholar.
I have one last question, just because a lot of people did take this as an official document.
Well, it's official in the sense that it came out of the British government and was expressed a wish with a particular reservation. Yep, official.
But then what do you say to the millions of Palestinians? Some of them are still refugees in some countries. What do you tell them now that this declaration and the name of Balfour was so central to the path that they had in life, or they took in life after what happened in 1917 and 1948 and everything afterwards?
I think I've never understood why the Palestinians and the Jews did not all just get on and build the fabulous economy together. It's been so one-sided, and I never understood why the Palestinian side was not keeping up with the Jewish side.
Maybe because a lot of them were expelled out of their homes.
Arab Israelis who very happily coexist. I mean, why after the Intifada in 2014, was it, did Hamas decide to destroy all the greenhouses, that had been left by the Israelis to help grow food for the Palestinians? As I understand it, Hamas didn't want their population to be happy. They wanted them to be constantly fed an anti-Israel mantra. Not good for peace.
Thank you, Lord Roderick, for granting us this interview and for your time. Thank you for watching. This was an interview with Lord Roderick Balfour, the great-nephew of former British Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour. Thank you for watching.